The year 1979 marked the end of Idi Amin's rule in Uganda, and the period following this was characterized by turmoil. Multiple different factors, including the AIDS pandemic, the Ugandan Bush War, and the Catholic Church becoming wrapped up in numerous scandals, all played a part in making Uganda a very unstable place. As a result of the instability and chaos, many charismatic people declared themselves messiahs who renounced the authority of the church and government. One such movement was the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, which was founded by Credonia Murinde and Joseph Kibwetir in southwestern Uganda in 1989. Both men claimed to have visions of the Virgin Mary, which attracted many Catholic clergymen in addition to superstitious locals. The goals of the MRTC were to obey the Ten Commandments and preach the alleged word of Jesus Christ. One of their most prominent teachings was that to avoid damnation in the coming apocalypse, the Ten Commandments had to be adhered to very strictly. The group's beliefs about the Ten Commandments were so strong that they discouraged talking out of fear of breaking the ninth commandment, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." Sign language became a common method of communication within the group. Adherents fasted regularly, and they were only allowed to eat one meal on Fridays and Mondays. Sex and soap were forbidden. They believed that AIDS was a punishment from their God due to people breaking the sixth commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." The group's full set of beliefs were explained in a booklet titled "A Timely Message from Heaven, The End of the Present Time." New members were required to read this booklet as many as 6 times. The movement's leaders declared that the apocalypse would occur on December 31st of 1999, and only the most faithful would escape eternal damnation. They taught that the Virgin Mary had a special role in the coming apocalypse, and that she was communicating with the cult's leaders. The group developed a hierarchy of what they called visionaries, with the leaders at the top and former priests below them. These priests served as the group's theologians, who served the purpose of explaining the leaders' messages. However, not everyone was happy with the apocalyptic cult growing in size and power. In October of 1993, the group was kicked out of Kanungu, the town where their headquarters had been located since the group's founding in 1989. This removal would only end up being temporary because the movement experienced a significant uptick in converts after a priest named Dominic Kataribabo joined the group. Dominic was very popular and had gotten a PhD in the United States, which made people revere him even more than they already did. He brought large numbers of new followers to the movement, and Kibwetir was forced to sell 3 of his properties, as well as his car and milling machines, in order to fund the expanding movement. By the late 1990s, the movement was located on several pineapple and banana plantations, where adherents lived communally on the land. Murinde claimed to receive messages from the Virgin Mary through everyday objects, and new buildings were being constructed to support the recruitment and indoctrination of new members. In 1992, the group was ordered to leave the village of Rwashamer by the village elders, and they returned to the Kanungu district, where Murinde's father offered them a large property. In 1993, things started going downhill for the movement. Their school was closed due to a measles outbreak, and a prominent member of the group left the next year, taking 70 members with him. In 1998, the movement was shut down due to unsanitary conditions, use of child labor, and the distinct possibility that the group had been kidnapping children to indoctrinate. Unfortunately, the group was allowed to reopen later that year. With the new millennium rapidly approaching, the movement was scrambling to make their doomsday preparations. With 1999 coming to a close, the movement leaders urged their followers to sell their possessions for cheap prices and then turn over the profits to them. Work on the plantation stopped, and everyone gathered together on December 31st, poised for the apocalypse, holding their breath and waiting for the last moments of human existence. But then the clock struck midnight, the year 2000 began, and nothing happened. There was no apocalypse. In the following weeks, members started asking uncomfortable questions about their leaders, and many people demanded that the leaders return their money. Donations to the movement decreased by a dramatic margin, and the leaders realized that they had to do something to retain control. So what did they do? The same thing as every other apocalyptic cult when they realized that they got their end times prediction wrong. They picked a new date. No, they said. The apocalypse wasn't on December 31st of 1999. It's actually going to happen on March 17th of the year 2000. The movement leaders recognized the fact that there was no reason to believe their second prediction would be any more accurate than their first, so they hatched a plan to circumvent that possibility. The movement hosted a massive party in the town of Kanungu, where reports suggested that they roasted 3 bulls and drank countless bottles of Coca-Cola. The movement leaders brought their followers inside the local church and then boarded up the windows and doors. Just minutes later, nearby villagers heard an explosion from the direction of the church, and they rushed over to see what was happening. The building had gone up in flames, and the stench of burnt flesh was suffocating the town. A total of 530 people were roasted alive. In the aftermath, many of the villagers reported that they were unable to eat meat for several months because of the memory of that horrific stench. The police initially believed that the group had agreed to take their own lives en masse, but this hypothesis was quickly discarded. The 5 main leaders of the cult were all missing from the wreckage, which suggested that they had orchestrated the explosion before escaping. Investigators discovered that Dominic Kataribabo had purchased 50 liters of sulfuric acid just days before the party, which was most likely the cause of the explosion. The leaders had also announced that there would be a party on the 18th, the day after the explosion, which was probably a means of throwing the authorities off their scent. 4 days after the explosion, the police investigated the properties that the movement had owned and operated from, and their discovery confirmed their suspicions that the explosion had been mass murder. They found hundreds of bodies at various sites. Some had been poisoned, others stabbed. Medical examinations determined that they had been killed 3 weeks before the explosion. The entire scenario had been premeditated. The police announced that the final death toll of the movement was 924. The investigation was poorly handled due to the lack of forensic resources in Uganda, and researchers did not show much interest in the case. Over the years, some people have stepped in to offer new perspectives on the findings of the police. An anthropologist named Richard Vokes wrote a book in 2009 in which he argued that the bodies found on movement property were not murder victims, but rather the victims of a malaria epidemic from years prior. He cited the lack of autopsies and a witness who was a former member of the movement. The Ugandan government issued a warrant for the arrest of Kibutir and Murinde, but they have never been found. They remain on the run to this day, and who knows where they're hiding. On December 15th of 2012, the Ukrainian police responded to a report of dead bodies in an apartment building in the city of Kharkiv. They were prepared to find a crime scene that would churn some stomachs, but they never guessed the true extent of what the crime scene actually contained. The bodies of a 58-year-old judge named Volodymyr, his wife Irina, their son Sergei, and Sergei's girlfriend Maria Zoyeva were not just dead, they had all been decapitated. Their heads were missing. Whoever had taken their lives had also taken 4 sickening trophies. Some reports have suggested that the murder weapon could have been a machete, sword, or axe, but the police never confirmed a particular weapon. What they did confirm was that Sergei had been beheaded while he was still alive. The others had been killed first, then beheaded, but Sergei wasn't shown that small mercy. The utter brutality of this case is unfathomable. Volodymyr Trofimov had served as a judge for over 30 years, so he was a well-known public figure in Kharkiv. He was also a known collector of antiques, particularly rare coins, World War II medals, and China statuettes. The fact that he was an antiques collector caused the police to form a theory that the attack had been a robbery gone wrong, a group of burglars who wanted to get their hands on some valuable items. However, this theory seems very unrealistic to most people, including myself. What kind of robbery gone wrong ends in a quadruple decapitation? 2 newspapers reported that some items were missing from the apartment, but the sheer violence of the murders seems to suggest that robbery wasn't the main motive. A petty thief doesn't behead their victims and then take the heads as a trophy. The second hypothesis is that the murders were for revenge. The date of the attack, December 15th, is Judges' Day in Ukraine, a national holiday that celebrates judges. This fact led investigators to speculate that the murders could have been related to Volodymyr's career. It could have been revenge for a ruling, or even a message to the judicial system at large. Some sources have suggested that corruption could have played a part as well. The murder of a publicly known judge was a massive news story in Ukraine, and the Interior Minister Vitaly Zakharchenko flew to Kharkiv alongside the Prosecutor General in order to oversee the investigation. Despite this, no suspects were ever arrested and the heads were never found. The investigation petered out and the case remains unsolved. Speculation continues to circulate to this day, and one theory that has been posited by people more recently is that Sergei was the actual target of the murders, not Volodymyr. However, this has never been proven. The Trofimov Beheadings remains a chilling and gruesome Ukrainian mystery, and that doesn't seem likely to ever change. Click the join button to become a member today. Channel members receive exclusive content as well as early access to all my content. At the height of its power, ISIS controlled approximately 100,000 square miles of territory across Iraq and Syria, and millions of people were under the yoke of their oppression. By 2019, the organization was falling apart and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was in hiding. In October of that year, a United States Special Forces operation raided a village in northwestern Syria, causing al-Baghdadi to retreat into a tunnel with 3 of his children. The Americans sent a K-9 unit after him, and al-Baghdadi detonated his explosive vest, which killed both himself and his children. The brutality of his regime was over, albeit with sickening collateral damage. In the aftermath of al-Baghdadi's death, much information was learned about the nature and actions of his caliphate, which included the brutal subjugation of women. However, what they did not expect to find was the crucial role of women in the caliphate's misogynistic practices. A survivor of the regime said, "I was much more afraid of women. The women would beat you for the smallest thing, how you looked or wore your headscarf. They used whips and metal sticks." The Al-Khanssaa Brigade was a force of women that was formed in 2014. The brigade initially consisted of 60 women, and their purpose was to enforce Sharia law in the Islamic states of Raqqa and Mosul, as well as refugee camps in nearby territories. The group was most likely named after the famous Arabic poet Al-Khanssaa, who had lived on the Arabian Peninsula during the early days of Islam in the 7th century CE. The Al-Khanssaa stand out from other Islamic police forces because they were all women, and it was usually men who enforced Sharia law. The fact that the brigade was entirely female did not make them any more sympathetic to women's issues. An official named Abu Ahmad spoke on behalf of the Islamic State, saying, "We have established the brigade to raise awareness of our religion among women and to punish women who do not abide by the law." Raising awareness and punishing women were understatements. Any woman who left the home without a man or who did not fully cover themselves in public were viciously beaten with whips and metal sticks. In 2015, 2 women in Raqqa received 20 lashes for wearing form-fitting abayas, 5 lashes for wearing makeup, and another 5 lashes for not being meek enough when detained. According to women who defected from the brigade, new recruits were trained for 3 months in firearms handling and religion, and they received 25,000 Syrian pounds each month. In addition, women were not allowed to drive cars or carry weapons in the Islamic State, but women who joined the Al-Khanssaa Brigade were permitted to do both. In April of 2017, the group released a recruitment video for female hackers claiming that they hacked over 100 social media accounts the previous month. That same year, Al-Khanssaa members served as snipers in the defense of Mosul against Iraq's security forces. The brigade was also known for overseeing brothels that used enslaved women, and a former member of the brigade reported that the standard punishment for trying to escape was 60 lashes. The standard punishment for wearing high-heeled shoes or not wearing an abaya was 40 lashes. Sometimes the male guardians of a lawbreaker would be whipped alongside the woman. Little girls were not spared the violence, and they were flogged alongside the adults. The brigade were given a daily target by their superiors, which required them to catch at least 30 offenders per day to prove their faith. After a woman was beaten, she would be sold to a senior member of ISIS to be used however he saw fit. One of the things the Al-Khanssaa was responsible for was disseminating propaganda and recruiting foreign women, which took place most heavily in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Recruiters exploited the ethnic tensions between Sunni and Shia Muslims to lure young women into the Islamic State. The Al-Khanssaa is no more, but the mental scars remain firmly in place for their victims. The survivors remain as a chilling testament to the resilience of some, while the former brigade members are a stark reminder that tribalism and social conditioning have the potential to make people do genuinely horrific things.